Welcome to Post Status Live. I'm your host, Jonathan Wold. I lead partnerships here at Post Status. And here at Post Status, our focus is on helping to grow the WordPress economy. We want to support the businesses that serve the WordPress ecosystem. And with Post Status Live, one of the things that we like to do is bring in experts like Mike and Sabrina to help us take a relevant topic and help us understand like how to think and where to focus and give us some practical tips and guidance on the topic at hand. Today's topic, of course, is front-end performance. Front-end performance in WordPress. It's a term we hear a lot. Performance optimization. There's a lot of different things. I personally have found it can be a bit overwhelming at times to parse through all the information available. And we're gonna unpack that today and look at how we can think about performance and what we can put into practice to get more out of WordPress ourselves. So let's go ahead and introduce our experts today. We have Mike Crantea. He's a principal engineer at XWP and someone who, Mike, do you care about performance?
For maybe 10 years now.
Yes.
So yes, I do hold it dear to my heart, and it's very rewarding to see when little changes make a big difference.
Yes, I had the privilege of working closely with Mike for quite a few years back at XWP, and it's amazing like especially at scale when you're working on sites that have millions and millions of page views, like little changes can make a big difference. Yet the same principles apply whether it's a small site or a big site. So excited to unpack that. And we also have Sabrina Zeidan. She's also a performance engineer at XWP. And Sabrina, you're also involved in an upcoming WordCamp. What's that about?
WordCamp is about WordCamp Europe happening in Portugal in June. And yeah, I'm in an organizing team. I am leading content team. So yeah, I'm hoping after this, you can blame everyone who is watching this can blame me for bad content at WordCamp Europe 2022, or send best wishes if it's a delight.
It's going to be fantastic, I'm sure. I'm excited about that. It's a fantastic venue. Hope everything goes well for it, and appreciate all the efforts that you and so many other volunteers are putting into making it happen. All right, so we're about to jump in. If you have questions as we go, we're going to be saving time at the end for questions. So I encourage you to put those into Zoom and we will get to them. So site speed, I think it's been a hot topic for a while, but it just continues to, I feel like, pick up and amplify, no pun intended. While it's hard to disagree in my experience with the importance of having a fast site, I find that performance as a whole can feel like a pretty daunting topic. Like there's so much you can do. There's so many things that you can look at. What do you guys, I know that you have a bias, but I want to kind of unpack this. Help us understand, like, is performance just like a passing fad, or is it something that's worth figuring out? Mike, what do you think?
I think people should care about the users, and if it's about performance or accessibility or the content, it's all part of a whole that you want to deliver as a best experience on the web. So when looking at the digital realm, you have less opportunities to impress compared to the real world, where you can impress in many ways. When all you have is a website, you have less of an opportunity for a lasting impression if you introduce friction. Making the website that's easy to access and fast provides a good foundation to work your way up with more pieces on top of it, like good design, good user experience, good content, and that lures people to come in and stay. And making something that is just fast isn't useful. For example, the fastest website in the world is a blank one, but no one would have any joy gotten outside of that.
I like this idea of performance like as a foundation that you build on. Sabrina, what are your thoughts? Is performance just, why is the topic important?
You know, Jonathan, you mentioned just the right words. You said you can do a lot of things, but in our life, we can do a lot of things about all the topics, right? We can do whatever we want. And with performance, the same, we can do a lot of things. And the main thing is to know what not to do.
Hmm.
I think it's very important to differentiate what to do and what keep it as it is. To my mind, performance is somewhat similar to health. You need to do consistent efforts to keep it good, but still you don't want to overstress about it, because with overstressing, you only make it worse. We see this a lot, like two sides of range, right?
Yep.
Some people just they don't care about performance at all. They just are not thinking about it. It's just like weather, it comes and goes, and that's it. And
Yep.
so they don't put any efforts in it. And other people care, just overstress about it a lot and care about performance more than anything in the world, while performance is not the answer to all their hopes. I think this is the major. It's not even about performance, about WordPress, about tech. I think this is like a mindset issue here.
I like that idea of the range, because it's like a continuum, right? Like if any of you have had a background in like service, I've had the agency background. You guys work in an agency now, and like, yeah, you can have clients who either don't seem to care much about it, or you can have clients that just obsess about it to the point of, well, so I'm curious, like in your experience, what could it look like? Let's take that extreme for a moment. What could it look like to be like too focused on performance? Like how could that have a negative impact on the user?
Just two quick examples. First one, when you're obsessed about everything, you want to do everything that's possible. So you just put, say, 4 caching plugins on your website, few optimization plugins. You go and just check all the boxes you have, and you kind of feel well about doing something. But we see a lot that a lot of sites getting over optimized. Like someone has put effort into optimizing it, but at such level that it gets over optimized, and the results of the website is bad, is just because it's over optimized. We'll get into like practical examples later, I think, and we'll give examples where you shouldn't be like if nothing would be done in that area, it would be even better if then it's done. Yeah.
Mike,
and
what
another
about
example?
Oh, go ahead,
Sorry.
please, Sabrina. No, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and another example, when people expect of site speed to solve all the problems they have. What is our main problem on the internet? It's visitors, right?
Yep.
So
Traffic.
I think, yeah, traffic. People are expecting that fixing the issues with site speed will bring loads of traffic to their website, but it's not how it works. Site speed is only a part of search engine optimization.
Yep.
So there is search engine optimization, and then there is user experience, which is a part of search engine optimization. And then under experience, we have this site speed, which is just a part of user experience. It's important. It can be a blocker. We saw a lot of examples when it is a blocker. Yep. But once that blocker is resolved, fixed, there are a lot of other things to do to bring traffic to your website, to make your users happy, to bring money into your pocket.
Mike, in your experience, you've worked with, as you mentioned, like 10 plus years of this. You've worked with a lot of clients. What does it look like for you to be like too focused on performance? How could you take it too far?
My experience on this goes towards removing functionality for the sake of performance when that functionality is useful for the visitor. Okay. So let's say you have on your website the bookmarking feature that slows you down by 0.1 seconds, and the people use that feature, and you remove it just for the sake of making that website just a tiny bit faster. Okay. This is like taking a pebble that's useful out of the website, which is degrading the user experience. And On the other part, some old type of optimizations, like lazy loading of images, like, hey, that's a checkbox inside of the site speed. When you go to the extreme, you're lazy loading absolutely everything, and you're slowing down the moment when people see the image they came to see on your website, because it's all going down of eat with with balance to maintain the health.
I like Sabrina, you mentioned that concept of health. Mike, in this at the beginning you mentioned like first impressions, right? I want to unpack that a little bit. So in the physical world, like if I go into a storefront, like you mentioned, right? Like there are a lot of different factors that make up my first impression, right? There's going to be the things I see, maybe the sounds, maybe the smells, the just the presence, right? This digital world, I think so a lot of the same principles apply, but it seems like the key concept feels like it's something about friction, right? Like why is friction important in that context?
That's a very good question, and I believe it can help with the visualization and making easier to understand what this means in the digital world. Taking, for example, a shop. Okay. Would you want the client to take more than 10 seconds to push the door just to get in? If you have that problem and you notice it, like you visualize it, you would ask some handyman that knows how to fix the doors and get that clear out as soon as possible. Why is that not the case with the web? If your web loads in 10 seconds, why is there are so few people that care about your front door being stuck?
And I think one of the challenges perhaps with the web in general is because it's abstract, often folks will have the experience of, oh, well, it's fast for me. Like maybe I have a fast connection, or maybe it's already cached or something. And it's like, oh, it's fast for me. And they're not thinking, because if it was physical, like everyone, you're kind of seeing the same thing. And if there's a problem, you're more likely to see it. Whereas with this abstract, with this digital world, it's not quite as obvious.
Everyone has a different baseline.
Yes.
That's a fact.
Yes. And people are there's so many different factors, which can be part of what makes it overwhelming, right? It's like accounting for all the different browsers, connection speeds, devices. Yet it seems like there are some key principles. Sabrina, you mentioned search engine optimization, right? Maybe kind of unpack that a little bit. Like in my experience working with clients over the years, people asking about performance, there tends to be some kind of a hook to it. Like there's a reason why they want it. And for some, it's user experience. For a lot of them though, it's this, we want to get better search rankings. So in your experience kind of working on this over the years, what should someone expect? Like what kind of connection or correlation should they expect between the performance of a site and how they do on the search engines?
I think in short, if you just put it short, site speed shouldn't be a blocker to a search engine results to higher rankings, but it can deliver the website higher just by itself. But what we all need to do is just to make sure it's not a blocker. When Google releases some updates, and when we have something like we saw something in green and now it's in red, we usually get frustrated. But it's not about it's not that it got worse at this point, but the information that we have now. What I'm trying to say, that sometimes when we see that results got worse, we get upset, like, oh no, something happened, now my site will be penalized or something like this. but it's not what's happening. It's just the way Google is giving us more information how we can improve, and that's it. And it's good that
The standards are evolving. Like they're
yes,
the
it's
bar
very
is
good.
raising,
It's
yeah.
giving information to the webmaster, to the developer, to the business owner, how to handle all this. Because without having this roadmap, we would be guessing what's happening there, won't we?
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's interesting. So, all right, let's take, so let's say you use one of these tools and you
Mhm.
get these numbers back, you get these scores. Can you, for those of us, I think a lot of folks are probably at least basically aware, but can you kind of walk us through, like, what are some of these metrics and where are these numbers coming from?
I know that Mike has very nice examples of some origins of metrics that are coming
Mike?
from past.
Yeah. Want to talk us through that, Mike?
Yeah, I was really enjoying reading about this, the history of how finding a good metric came to be, and the fact that it came out of research and science tests with actual humans before all of this turned out to be distilled into what we now see as the Web Vitals.
Yeah.
Um, it used to be very hard to know what's a good user experience. Let's say maybe 10 years ago, what everyone cared is time to first byte, how quickly the server starts sending text to the browser. Like that was it. You
Yeah.
have that fast and this is done. But that was just one metric that was easy to grasp and easy to understand. But that was not the whole experience. And with the addition of more and more type of metrics, the more uh, we can understand that it's not just one point in time that matters, but the whole process, the whole experience. And the addition of these metrics is beneficial because you get to know more of the customer's journey without having recording and analyzing and doing this type of manual labor. You get it out of some distilled information. And I will give you an example of the first input delay, and that is one of the Web Vitals which seems to be the harder to grasp or to understand. And this makes a simple recommendation. When the user interacts with the website responds within less than a tenth of a second. This is rooted in a study that was made in '68 on a response time in man-computer conversational transactions. And they found out in that study where it was something simple. The people were asked to press a button and the light changed, the color changed on a screen. And they introduced various delays between when the user clicked the button and when the screen changed its color.
Yep.
And when the color of the screen changed within less than a tenth of a second, the majority of the people said it was my push of the button that triggered that change of the screen. When that was delayed to, let's say, 200 milliseconds, the people were more likely to say that that screen changed its color by itself. I just clicked the button, it did nothing, and suddenly it surprised me that the color switched. So this causality, the attachment between your interaction and what happens on screen gets broken when you're exceeding this 100 millisecond mark.
So it's like so first input delay, it's like that's one of the metrics, and we'll talk about the others in a moment. And it sounds like the idea there is that you want the first input delay to be as small as possible, and there's this target of less than you said a tenth of a second? Yeah, less than a tenth of a second. And the idea is that if that, and I'm assuming in practice, what we're talking about is like the website, like when I click, something happens, right? Is that like,
let's say you click the hamburger button and it should open up the menu within less than a tenth of a second. If it stays and stays and after a second, like boom, I have a menu. Where did you come up from? And this breaks the connection between the user and the digital interface, and they feel the friction. They feel something is happening, and they have to use cognition to make the connection between the user interaction, the click, and what happened. Like, hey, I did that. Right. On the other hand, when it happens quickly enough, this happens automatically inside of our brain, and there's no extra added load to the user that this is what's been caused by them. So it's very interesting because that's what makes applications feel better than the web, because they are
They don't
doing
have
this
that
thing
delay.
right. They have
Yeah.
this, everything happens quickly.
And then we will say something that it was a smooth experience, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, so time to first byte was an example of an older metric that, yeah, it sounds like a lot of people focused on. But if I'm hearing you right, part of the challenge with that is that it's not necessarily connected to the user experience, like, or it's not as directly. Whereas, for instance, first input delay is a user centric metric that's focused on, like, what are they experiencing?
Yes.
What are the other ones? Can you kind of briefly walk us through the other metrics that matter here?
Yes, the other one is the largest contentful paint. That's a web vital, and it's an evolution of the first contentful paint, which first contentful paint is when the first piece of content shows up on the screen.
Okay.
And the largest contentful paint is when the biggest piece on the screen gets loaded. That gives the perception from the user that, hey, most of it is already there. I am ready to interact with the website because it's not mostly a blank slate. So both of these are, again, user-centric metrics, because the first time to first byte is not something that the user perceives, but the machines can easily. While the image getting painted on the screen, yes, that's something that matters for the user, that makes them feel good about the progress being there and happening. And there's also, so there's first input delay, the largest contentful paint, and the layout shift, which is a new metric that is connected to when things move on screen without the user doing something. Like when something gets injected and pushes content that you're reading while you're reading it. That's frustrating. And that is why, again, it's a piece of user-centric centric metric that annoys a lot, that used to annoy a lot of people. And that is why, with some help, with some really smart engineers and web advocates, ended up becoming something we can measure and pay attention to.
I like that a lot. Sabrina, in your experience, like, so you've seen some of this evolution of metrics over the years. Like, does anything stand out to you of, like, what you've learned? Let me ask this a different way. When I think performance first started to become a topic, right? We had things like time to first byte. It wasn't really connected to the user experience so much. It was just more numbers, and people would sort of obsess about that. Have you found, in your experience working with clients and talking about these things, this shift to more user-centric metrics to be helpful? Like, is it becoming easier to explain these topics? Are you finding it helpful?
I think that even though some people might not still be knowing the details, they should try to understand how user perceives their site. And this is the main idea. Like, for example, with this CLS, we all knew before it was introduced, we all knew that it's just irritating when you're trying to click something and then you click on the ad instead of clicking on the menu, right? We knew this before Google said that how it's called, before Core Web Vitals, we knew it. But from now on, we just have the name. We just have the name for it. So I think this just helping to change a mindset for all of us, for developers, for business owners, to look into the right thing. And just another example with largest contentful paint. Like, we understand that blank page is not informative, and then this largest contentful paint, that it's not something like first contentful paint. It's not just a piece of information. It's something that you can from what you can get information for which you came to that website. It should be something meaningful. We understand that, but also I see more and more people understanding that largest contentful paint can be not something they expect to be. Sometimes it happens with ads, sometimes it happens with cookies consent or something else. So these pop-ups or cookies consent or ads are counted as largest contentful paint, but in fact, it has nothing to do with real user experience. Real user experience, good user experience would be when they see largest contentful paint as a piece of content from that website.
Yep.
Would it be video or image or piece of text or something? And I think all these changes, they just help us see all this through user experience, and that's it. It's just helping us to see it that way.
And
No
I
matter
imagine
if we know the details or no.
I imagine this is also helping people who care about user experience to better advocate for this. It's like, hey, performance matters. Most people agree that performance matters, but then having these concepts, having these more user-centric metrics is able to drive that better. It's able to give them some more weight to
100%. Even on conferences, right? Do you see this shift too? Like 10 years ago, user experience was a niche, and it was like something good, but not
wasn't important. It was
yes,
like
it's like good to have on top of everything. While now we have a lot of very practical talks, very practical learning material that have, when you have metrics, it just help you to understand the thing better. And more people would like to share information having before, after in their hands.
Yep. I like that a lot. So Mike, we talked a bit about over optimization, right? Let's focus on the positive now. Like in your experience, what does what makes up a successful optimization?
A delightful experience, as simple as that. And you can take that as from the context of perceived performance.
Okay.
And it's not as much about the numbers, but as much as when you access something and you interact with it, whether it's something pleasant. And I've read at some point about a new measurement metric of perceived performance score, where if you sometimes optimize so much for, let's say, the first contentful paint, how quickly you get the first piece of content that shows up, but leave the largest contentful paints to take more than 4 seconds after that point, that is super quick. You get it like in half a second on your screen and the image in 5 seconds. This user experience is bad, but maybe showing the first pixel in 2.5 seconds and within just 2 seconds to have the image showing up, that's not bad user experience, because the user sees something, you have 2 seconds of his patience that something is happening, then something more is happening, then it resets, and you have 2 more seconds of his attention. So keeping the flow of not having a stale site or the stale image of a stale something for too long while the load happens can change the way this is perceived. And having tests from people that have different ages can give you different results. So your audience matters with what is a successful optimization, a successful website. If your audience is younger audience, you gotta be quick, because those guys have no patience.
That's interesting. I like this idea of focusing on delight, as it's like, what are they experiencing? And what can be tricky, I found for a lot of folks, is it requires you to empathize and to think about your audience and what they're experiencing, right? Because we can often and it's perfectly normal to use our own experience as a starting point. Yet you can quite easily fall into the trap, like we mentioned earlier, like, oh, it's fast enough for me, right? Like, and that can be for any number of reasons. And if I'm understanding right, like this, where the metrics can come in is to help us have a more standardized way of getting these numbers, getting that sense of where we're at in a way that represents broader interests, right? Because when you run these analysis tools, they do so on behalf of a much wider range of different connection speeds and device types, et cetera. And so it gives you a more objective way of practicing empathy on behalf of your audience, which ultimately it's like knowing who your audience is and then making sure that you're okay. How do I give them a delightful experience? And it's interesting too, what you mentioned about the like if you're intentional about designing it, it's like, yeah, you might have a large set of assets that need to be loaded, but you can pay attention to how those assets are loaded and let the user know that something's happened. So for those who are maybe not on the fastest connection, they can still see it's working. Like it's getting there. I like that a lot. Sabrina, so you mentioned earlier, we talked a little bit about like you were giving us some examples of going too much, like putting too many things in place. When's good enough with performance? Like how far should you go? How do you know like, all right, we're good for now?
We all know that Google recommends us to keep it to 75% of users as a good experience, right? At XWP, we target at 85, we recommend that. But what behind those numbers, I would say that what you mentioned, Jonathan, about knowing your audience. For some websites, it's crucial to give good experience, not just for majority of users, but for majority of users who bring money. You have to know your audience. If, for example, the majority of your users are coming from one location, but there is a specific group of your users that are coming from another location and they're having different experience, but that group from that region, from that country or something, is bringing the most value to your business, you have to target that group. I'm not saying you have to bring bad experience to other group, but that should be your priority first of all. And by knowing the audience, what does it mean? I like very much what Mike mentioned about the age, because when thinking about the audience, we usually talk about what? We usually talk about geographic, device, connection. But yeah, indeed, knowing about their age, some specifics of their usage of the website will help you to understand who are your priority group and how to target their experience.
I like it a lot. I want to get to some examples in a few moments here, but before that, can you talk? So let's say for those who are listening, say, okay, we have a little bit more context. We understand like over optimization. We don't want to like obsess about this too much. We want to focus on health. We want to focus on delight. We've talked a bit about the metrics and how those metrics help us do that. Can you walk us through just some of the tools? What are some of the tools that are available to us? And then we'll get into some examples.
There are a lot of tools, right? We all know that there are a lot of tools. I will just point out that there are two types of tools. First type of tools is lab testing, tools for the lab tests. You can put some values there. You kind of can set them up to test with a certain device type or connection or even geographic position, but still it lab tests. And another large group of tools are for real user experience, real user metrics, and you have to differentiate those. So for tuning, for tests, for figuring out what's happening there, it's good to run lab tests.
Okay.
But to understand real users' experience on the website, we have this real users metrics tools. For example, first of all, from Google, Page Speed Insight, it's lab tests. What you see in Google Search Console, Core Web Vitals tab, it's field data. You have this small block of field data in Page Speed Insights as well, but more information you have in Google Search Console. But apart of that, there are different tools you can use. For example, at XWP, we use Treo.sh.
Okay.
It gives us it's a very nice tool. It gives us information differentiated by Core Web Vitals by different audiences. I think we can even screen share now. And yeah, thank you, Mike.
Yeah, this is the site speed page for the post status.
Yep.
And this aggregates information from the Chrome Real User Experience Report that's broken down by the Web Vitals. And you can see in time how which percentage of your visitors are getting a good, moderate, or poor experience given this given the ranges recommended.
Yep.
And this part with the past 28 days is the data that is visible on the Google search, Google PageSpeed Insights page. Again, broken down with which percentage of your visitors have which type of experience. And there's also a geography bit that, according to how much traffic you're getting from some countries, they can show up in here with it's an average of moderate, it's an average of good, or something like that, and can pinpoint that, hey, maybe I'm getting lots and lots of traffic from Australia and I need to drag a new pipe of internet fiber connection and make it faster. So yeah, this is a very easy way for anyone to check the health of their websites.
One of the things, Sabrina, I'm curious about, like there are so many different tools out there. Like I've seen some folks who will get us one score on one and one score on another. Do you have any just guidance as we'll jump back into examples, but any guidance?
One guidance, one tool. You just pick one tool and stick to it. That's it. Because when you're comparing apples to oranges, it never works, right? So what we all need to do is just to pick one and to track the same test done under the same conditions also, because sometimes people are doing tests in the same tool but picking up different conditions and they're trying to compare those. We need to run tests in different conditions, but not to compare and track and monitor performance, but to find issues and find bottlenecks. And for monitoring, we pick one tool and just track the results there. That's the main advice.
Mike, could you walk us? Oh, go ahead, Mike. What were we going to say?
Be consistent. Yeah,
be consistent.
I was only confirming. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've seen people, and I've seen some of this in my previous client experiences, sort of chasing like, hey, good over here, but I got this on this tool over here, and it's that gets into the side of like over obsession, right? Where it's like you get diminishing returns at some point. Mike, I'm curious if you could walk us through post status a bit more of what you're seeing. I like to kind of pick on us as an example. When you bring up a score like that, what are some of the things that stand out to you from looking at our own site?
We did a bit of research, yeah.
Yeah, talk us through that. What did you guys find?
Okay, the first thing that got us the green light when we checked out the post status website was the fact that the content was playing in 4 seconds, and beyond the 2 seconds mark, you're starting to lose traffic because of the bounce rate that increases. There are several studies online that confirm that if your content paints within 2 seconds, you get the majority of the traffic staying on your website and your bounce rate is small. As you go towards 3 or 4 seconds, this is where you can get maybe a fifth or even more than the traffic that could stay on your website to leave because they lost patience and they just go back to Google and click on the next result. So we focused on optimizing, like checking one page on your website, and I will share my screen. We checked out this podcast page, and we ran the Lighthouse Test to see what's the test. And again, we're using this to have one metric and not look in 7 places when we compare the improvements. And we noticed that there's a big gap between the first contentful paint and the largest contentful paint, and it's a gap of 3 seconds. Okay. And this is where
we were wondering what's happening in those 3 seconds.
Yep. And with such a big gap, we thought that the assets prioritization isn't the best, or a case of layout shift. When investigating the first image in the viewport, we noticed that it had the loading lazy goodie. This loading lazy attribute is part of the WordPress core since a few versions back, making the first of our ideas being having a high likelihood of being right. So the lazy loading of the content images, which is automatic, is an example of over-optimization that plagues the WordPress ecosystem. On this side, there are some less important images that are not lazy loaded, but that's another story, and it doesn't have a big enough impact to be worth talking or looking into it. So what we've done is take a couple of elements. We remove this loading lazy, boom. We added a decoding async to attribute to the page, and this offloads the image processing from the main thread just for kinks. We adjusted the URL of the image to stop being loaded from the CDN and rather be loaded from the post status website directly. And we added something more, added a responsive image tag preload such that the image starts to come through the network pipes earlier, because it's an important element.
Yep.
So it wasn't a big issue here, but normally we check in general whether the image uses modern formats or not, and whether the right scaling of image is used, and you already had the image being responsive.
And I just want to point out, if I'm understanding right, part of what's happening here is like, if you just take like a one size fits all approach and say, oh, lazy loading is good, so you apply lazy loading to everything. In this case, what's happened is that it's quote unquote trying to lazy load the primary image, which is leading to a negative user experience, because like it should be the one that's showing up right away.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. So I used Chrome local overrides to apply the exact three things that we shared. And that moved the largest contentful paint from 7.7 seconds down to 4.8 seconds. Okay, and also the total blocking time went down because we stopped decoding the image on the main thread, which takes valuable CPU time. So okay, we had success. We had 3 seconds of improvement with very little effort. Now let's go towards optimizing the other part, which influences the most the bounce rates on a website. How quickly the pixels are painted on screen, how quickly they can start reading the content. And by the way, this is the mobile test for Lighthouse, so it checks it with fast 3G network speed.
Yep.
So of course on desktop you wouldn't have something like 5 seconds. So it's starting from that baseline.
Yep.
So
that basically means when you have something like this, like if you can get it good for 3G, like a fast 3G, then you're going to be great for most other things. Yeah.
Exactly. So for optimizing this, one thing that is good to be looked at is the waterfall. This is a webpagetest.org result, which shows what's happening. And what is seen here as the orange dotted line, this is the first contentful paint, when things got painted on screen. And we see that there's a ton of requests that are that have to finish before the paint is happening. So there's a couple of discoveries done while analyzing this. What we see that all of these critical requests are not coming from the main origin, but rather a different origin, that's CDN.post status. And when we click here, we see there's DNS lookup, initial connection, SSL negotiation, time to first byte. Everything gets added before your style sheet can start to download. Okay. So in our experience,
this is another example of over-optimization.
Gotcha.
As CDNs used to help when we were doing things with HTTP 1 without having HTTPS in play. And now this adds more than 600 milliseconds.
Interesting.
So what we added as a conclusion is delivering from the same origin all of the critical requests, the ones that are to the left of this dotted orange bar, can remove more than half a second from for the first contentful paint for the mobile devices. For the simplicity here, we swapped all of the CDN.post status by simply the origin, the post status, for everything via a global replacement. We noticed this thing in yellow. This is quite important.
Okay.
Okay, cloud.typography.com is a render blocking asset. This is an external origin that is being added as render blocking. Why is it a red flag? If this host stops responding, all of your visitors will have at least 10 seconds of staring at a blank screen
Yep.
until this request times out.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where asynchronous loading of the style sheets can remove the bottleneck. And when you're loading this type of typography in an asynchronous way, you tell the browser, hey, this is not very critical for the user experience. You can load it and render it before it's ready. So that means if the CDN stops responding, the only downside that your visitors are getting is they will see the fallback font, not the one coming from here, but they see the content to the same speed as they do right now. So that's another optimization that we did. And we can see in the waterfall that there was a failing request with the 404. And sometimes these take quite a lot of time. So because it's a 404, the time to first byte is 800 milliseconds. So the presence of a failing request in the critical request chain, like the ones that have this orange X, can add a whole second to the duration of the time of when the page loads. So we made this couple of changes, and this is the result. We went from 4.8 seconds down to 3.3 seconds on a fast 3G connection. This is a 1.5 seconds improvement, which involved in changing the cloud.typography to be async, load the assets from the same domain rather than a CDN, and removing a 404. That's all the effort to have 1.5 seconds improvement in this metric. And we started from almost 5.
One thing that's really standing out to me too is this idea of like things change over time. I remember, and for folks who've been on the web for a long time, this like emphasis on CDNs, for instance, right? You gotta have a CDN for everything. And we forget, if we're not in it, like at this point, like HTTPS, like the protocol is changing, like things have moved, but if you haven't stayed connected to it, you can still be stuck in like, all right, gotta have lazy loading, gotta use CDNs. And there are principles at play in those concepts and those specific practices that are still at play today, but the way that you do it has changed. Protocols change the way, and I think that's I think one of the general challenges with performance as a topic and technology as a whole is it can be really hard to keep up. As we start to move to the end, a couple things. So if anyone has any questions, now is a great time to continue just adding those to the chat here in Zoom, and we'll get to those. Can you guys begin to shift us? Would you begin to shift us towards what are your recommendations for folks? Like, given how vast performance is as a topic, what are some of the things that they should keep in mind? Like, what do we want people to take away from this?
To do something, take one step.
Okay.
Don't assume that any solution that you're getting is fast enough because I don't do much with it. It often happens that if you don't check your results through the lens of past 3G mobile phone, you will be oblivious of any harm or pain you're causing to the visitors that come to the website. So if if let's say all you see the images are loading slowly and you're optimizing one image, that is going to be 10,000 more impactful by the 10,000 visitors that will have that image load half a second faster. Okay. And you're doing it once, 10,000 people benefit. That's 5,000 seconds that you're saving out of people's lives. Think of the impact of making even small steps on everyone that joins on your website.
I like that. And one of the things I was impressed with the examples that you showed is that it was more about there were small adjustments that didn't require like redeploying of assets or like, because oftentimes we'll think, oh, I got to build a new site. Like I got to do all this stuff. It's like, no, sometimes it's actually it's a lot simpler than that. There are little things that you just need to adjust. I'll point out this to me is a good example of the value of bringing experts in, right? Because that's very obvious to you. If I looked at that without, I've gotten I'm not as sharp as I was a couple of years ago with from a development perspective, I might have said, oh, lazy loading, that's great, there's no problem here. And you saw it differently. Sabrina, what about from your perspective? What are, if you can sort of boil this all down, what would you add to what Mike said about, just start with something?
I would like to add to what you, Jonathan, said just now, that from your, for example, 2 years back perspective or experience, it might have looked okay. But the thing is that all things with performance and with development and WordPress, they change very frequently. Core updates, plugin updating, everything is changing. Third-party providers, they're changing their code, and something that was all right to do just a few months ago, it might not be all right to do now. For example, do you know that WordPress now has a performance team?
Yes, been very excited to see that. Yep.
So, and there are even more changes. Mike is a part of the team, by the way.
That's awesome.
Even more changes in the core are coming up. So something that we were saying it's all right to do 3 months ago, it might not be the case 3 months after. So it's to do something, as Mike mentioned, it's to monitor, not try to do everything in the world.
Yep.
And also to track for changes, to do the right thing. I think that's it.
I like that. And just kind of staying curious, I think is a general theme I find with this stuff, where it's like, all right, you've watched this. You guys mentioned that tool, treo.sh, I think it was, TRE. And there's other tools like it, but pick a tool and then stay curious to check things. And then we're part of a fantastic community, right? Both in WordPress broadly and PostStatus specifically.
Yeah.
As you check your sites for these things, you can share it with, and like, hey, this is what I'm finding. I'm curious, and get input from folks, and you can also get help with it too, right? Okay, a couple of questions. One of our attendees is asking, so when you think about all the different metrics, there's a lot of different performance metrics. What would you consider the lowest hanging fruit? Like where should folks start if they're going to pick a thing to focus on of the different metrics? What's a good start to get the most value for their efforts?
Content layout shift is not the easy one. That's true. To my mind, it's LCP is the one that is really easy to start with. What do you think, Mike?
I think the first contentful paint is easier because there is only one concept that needs to be treated nice, the critical rendering path. And you don't have to understand more than that beyond identifying what's needed for the first paint to be decent. So you can play by removing items from the critical path and adding them in depending on your experience, like remove that, refresh. It looks wrong. Okay, put it back. That's needed, or something like that. It's loading async of the style sheets and deferring the scripts is the most basic performance task there is.
Excellent, excellent. I know that. So you guys have worked with Google and continue to work with them for quite a few years now. On the resources side of things, is there any resources that you recommend? What are some pages if people want to learn more about these things? What are some resources they should go to?
Web.dev. That's the main resource we go to a lot.
Yep. And you guys have also contributed to that as well, I understand. There's been a lot of good work on that. So web.dev, it's a good central hub for this. I had a couple other. So let's see here. Mario asked about some examples. What are some examples of useful things like to take, like that you might take out of a site and when is a good time to add something in. So Mike, you gave an example of like the bookmarking functionality. Are any others that you've seen of like, all right, this is useful, but people take it out that they shouldn't be perhaps so quick to get rid of?
Well, when you talk about takeout, please take out sharing libraries, like add this share
Yes.
like button on Facebook. There are simpler ways to use the API and have the link getting you there without 1 megabyte of JavaScript. Useful things that are being taken out. Sometimes the prioritization is wrong by loading, for example, the ads before of the elements that consist of the content. So if you ask any marketing company that does user tracking, they would say, add this script in the head. If you ask any ad provider, add this script in the head. Everyone wants to get in the head because they want to be prioritized over everything else. What they don't explain is they ask for prioritization over the content. And please take them outside of the head. Put them down in the body. That's good enough. You get the ad experience after the content. If users see ads before they see content, they will bounce.
Yep.
So make sure the priorities are set up straight. I don't have other examples of what people usually remove because there's not as many.
I have one. I'm not sure
I-
you will agree with me, Mike, but it's custom fonts. I'm a huge hater of custom fonts. Like, you know, all these, some custom fonts are fine while they're small and loading fast. But to my mind, not many people really care about fancy typography when they can't see the actual content. But maybe typography designers would disagree.
I like that. That's it. That's a great, great example. Oh man, you're bringing back quite a few like web design project memories. Like, yes, sometimes people can be really precious about the fonts. Excellent. Well, this has been super helpful. I really appreciate you guys and the time. Any last pieces of guidance? I'm going to take a look at see if there's any other questions here. Oh wow.
Well,
Go ahead.
sorry.
Sabrina, go ahead.
Yeah, one piece of guidance. While we were talking, I just realized that really good example that I would give to my friend about performance is when you found out that it's bad, don't stress out about this. It was bad before you found out. Just take your time to fix it. That's fine. You know?
I like that. Here's what we're going to do. There's been a few more questions that have come in, so we're going to wrap up and then we'll stick on for that way we have the hour for the recording and then we can stay on afterwards for a few more questions. If you guys are okay with that. Yep. Perfect. So Mike, if folks want to learn more about you, where can people go? They
can follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/MEHIGH, me high. I'm tall, yeah. So here there, and feel free to pop a question and ask me to criticize your website. I promise I won't destroy it as bad as post status.
Excellent. And Sabrina, how about yourself? Where can people find you online?
It's Twitter. Sabrina_Zeidan and Sabrina Zeidan everywhere. It's nice to have a rare name with a surname. So yeah, Sabrina Zeidan.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for contributing your time. Thank you for the work that you guys have done in the WordPress ecosystem broadly and for your contributions to performance as a topic. And that's our wrap for now. Thank you guys all for attending.
Thank you very much. It was fun and it was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Excellent. All right. And we've just got a couple of extra questions for those who've stuck around. So Bryce wanted to know, do you think Google will take more into account like, or let me see if I get this right. I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Will I take account page speed in the future to reduce its inner cost? I'm not, I think I'm expecting the bar to continue to raise. That's how I'm understanding the question. Like, yes, the bar will continue to go up, and there's going to continue to be work that needs to be done there. Sorry, Bryce, if you're still around and wanted to clarify, I'm happy to try that again. So Andrew had a question here. He says, Google still uses pass-fail language for Core Web Vitals and PageSpeed Insights and Search Console, but they've also made it clear in May that it's not actually binary. He asked, do you have an in with Google to help to get them to change this language? It scares clients, that whole pass-fail concept. Do you have any insights? Is that something that you expect to see change in the future? I know that there's different tools that are also managed by Google at the same time. Anything you can tell us? It's okay if you can't.
Well, at least it was a positive that there was a need improvement in between, so it's not all black and white. And yeah, it's hard to make to explain how these metrics work, because the difference between the field data and the lab data has not been explained correctly. And this is where most of the clients don't understand that if some tool has a fail on it, while their actual real user metrics have a pass attached to it for the majority of visitors, that's harder to explain. So I think what needs to happen is for this type of clients to be pointed to learning materials between the lab and field data, and understand that there's some gray area in between, and it's not all black and white. But it can always get better the more people will contribute to the web.dev documents at the very least.
Yep. So, and that is something that's open to contribution. And in my experience, because Google has maintained multiple tools, like a lot more of the effort's been going into Lighthouse and Web Vitals, and I expect that some of the others are going to catch up. Yeah, and I know that you guys can pass on feedback as well. Josh asked a question. He said, we noticed that fade in animations affect FCP, first contentful pane, and LCP. Wouldn't that be an example of a good user experience that the test considers as poor due to the test? For example, flash of unstyled content will occur when the style sheet is loaded async. Any thoughts on that?
Sabrina, I can start if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Well, I think the fade in animation for the largest image is a subjective element. It can be artsy for some people, while some other people might hate the animations because they get motion sickness or something. Because it might be that the first elements that get loaded can have their animations removed and have the rest happen, or maybe the animation is taking for too long that it's affecting those metrics. I think my idea is that if you're doing animations on this type of elements, make them short, and then it won't harm you. And with regards to the flash of unstyled content that occurs when the style sheet is loaded async, you don't have to load async the style sheets that create the main page experience. But load async, for example, the style sheet that contains the web fonts, especially if it's coming from a different place, because without it, it's just a fallback font that shows up until the nice to have one comes through. And you can also add an async loading for the style sheets that have elements that are below the fold. Again, that speeds up the first paint without introducing the negative experience. Yes, don't async what's
I like your example of animations that Josh, I like that you bring that up, because we've talked a bit about audience specific things too, because for some audience, they might like that, for others, they don't. But sometimes I've seen this quite a bit with WordPress themes in particular, that they can be very like animation centric. Like you load it up and it's like, oh, there's, all this stuff happening, and that can be fine. But that I think it's important to ask the question, like, what's the right experience for my audience?
Right. And it's not about liking something usually. Like they might like it in general on some other website, like in the whole, the idea of animation, they might like it, but it might not bring any value to the table in this specific case.
Yep. Yep, I like that. Ivan asked a question. Do you think there will be new metrics added in the next year or two?
I
What do you guys
hope
think?
so. They like candy.
What kind of metrics would you guys want to see added? Like, kind of give us a sense of what should we be looking for or thinking about, whether it's an official metric or not.
I would
Of-
definitely like to see some explanation, more in-depth explanation of content layout shift. It would be nice to have like more clues where to look for it.
Okay. Mike, what about you?
There has been an announcement that it's under development to find a different metric that would change the first input delay to something that monitors the interactivity of the website for the entire duration of the visit, in a similar fashion as layout shift is measured for the entire user journey. So, and that would take into account the frame rate, how smooth the scroll happens, and all of that good stuff that makes an experience be butter smooth. So I'm looking forward to the first input delay evolution. And I hope there will be a sunsetting of the time to interactive, and
Yep.
because it only adds a lot, it created hacks that don't necessarily help the user experience
Yeah.
just to make that thing
That
go
seems to be
better.
the trick, because getting good scores seems to be worth so much to people that they end up compromising user experience in favor of getting the score. This is the general challenge with us
Yeah.
humans and our desire to win things, right? It's like, all right, this is a game, so I need the best score. And when you design it right, which is what I've liked about the Web Vital shift to saying, okay, it's about user experience. These concepts of delight are the foundation, and the metrics we give you are in service of that. So we're getting at least closer in that direction. A couple other questions. Jessica wanted to know, what do you guys think about sliders in terms of performance when you see sliders on a website?
Sliders are fine when they're fast. That's it. Slider. If you have a slider on your first screen, doesn't mean it should be slow. It can be pretty fast if it's set up well. If slider doesn't bring with it 1 megabyte of JavaScript and another megabyte of CSS, and then it doesn't load all the images in this slider in render blocking way, that's fine.
Mike, what do you think about sliders?
I think many sliders that exist right now are having the problem of waiting for the JavaScript to load it before things show up and look nicely. And that is the major culprit and why the sliders got such a bad rep. They can be done better.
Yeah, for what it's worth, from my experience at this point, in general, sliders, sliders are fantastic for gallery situations when you're wanting to present information. But a lot of people who like put it on the homepage, it's like it's often this, like, you're trying to cram too much information in. It's like, what choice do you want them to make, right? Because when it's all rotating like that. So just thinking about when to use it.
I feel it's more of an escape pipe when you have so much pressure coming, like we need to plug in on the homepage 10 different banners.
Yeah.
Like I have no room. Okay, how about hiding them in a slider? Like, okay, that at least will not make the homepage be have 2 kilometers long.
Yeah.
So
maybe
it's
trying to solve the wrong problem, perhaps.
yes, because sometimes there's too much pressure coming with different directions, and you have to do at some point what the client wants, and after you try to push back.
Bryce offered a clarification. So with Google, and what do you guys know, like, what's the official stance right now? Does performance impact your rank in Google? What does Google say about that?
Google says it does.
And
but they don't disclose how much it does.
They don't tell us how much it does. Yeah.
Right.
So it is a factor, but yeah, Mike, were you going to add something to that?
Yes. With the, and I think I will touch a little bit on the pass and fail. When someone has a decently running website, not great, just decent, just average, that won't get a penalty. But when something is, let's say, loads after 10 seconds, and that load over 10 seconds is one performance bit. But the fact that that page that loads after so many seconds has many bounces that go back to the Google search and then click on the next result has a negative impact with the click-through ratio.
Yep.
So there are side effects for bad performance that you might not get because the performance has such a big weight on the search engine ranking, but because it influences negatively other elements which are very, very important, like the click-through ratio and the penalty of bouncing and coming for the next results, having the meaning of that result was not useful to me. I had to look for another. So when you have a very bad performing website and going from bad to an average, you might find a huge lift by removing that big piece.
I like it. Stacy asked a great question. She's curious if you know of any specific WordPress themes, starters, frameworks, etc., that are good starting points with performance in mind. You guys, of course, at XWP do a lot of custom work, building from scratch. But for those who, they're looking for something more out of the box, do you guys have any recommendations?
Yes, one recommendation is the Astra theme. It has a free version and a pro version, and I believe it has a million uses or something. The way I've met it was because some host did a test with running 100 the top 100 most popular themes on the WordPress repo, and set it up with a set of popular plugins. Yep. And then ran test against them, load test, including checking how the backend without caching is doing. And this one came at a mile in front of the others, and it happened back in 2019. It might be that other teams have a good performance now. I've heard about some others, but I haven't played with them. But yeah. I'm glad Stacy enjoyed.
I'm super excited to see more themes for full site editing, because what's happening with Gutenberg now is very, very promising in terms of performance.
Yeah.
I think if we meet, say, in a year, it would be a different conversation about themes for Gutenberg for full site editing.
Excellent. Excellent.
There's one important element that I want to finalize on this theme. Even if you're using a theme like Astra or GeneratePress or something, if you're going to add a page builder that's different than Gutenberg, you might have a really bad time trying to get rid of it when you discover how much harm it did to the performance. Because out of the box, you get what you see is what you get, not performance.
Yeah, and of course it does vary. Some builders handle this a lot better than others.
Depending on how the user manages it, because there's that risk.
Well, and that's the key there, because the builder itself is often these days not even the fault. It's like what they can do. For instance, stuffing a really large picture somewhere and just saying this is what I want done, right?
Sometimes they give too much control to the editors that might not have the technical knowledge to decide what's good.
This is great. Well, thank you both so much for your time. Thank you everyone for your questions and contributions. And we'll see you guys next time. All right. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.